Hey folks, I'm headed to the office. Let me get that out of the way. Yeah, this is like day number 4. I go into the office this week, which is too much for me, to be honest. And we're gonna go to Reddit. I'm not gonna go tomorrow. It's a lot. And this one's about it's from experienced devs. Subreddit's called Collaborating Across Time Zones. So just a reminder, if we go through this video and you're enjoying it, you think it'd be helpful to share back onto this thread, please do me a favor and share the video link back there if you thought it was helpful, because I don't do self-promotion because I don't want to get banned. But if you think it's helpful, that would help me. So this person's saying, I have a conundrum, and they have basically teams across the US, so East and West Coast. So you're going to have a 3-hour time difference there. Remote first company, and then they're talking about basically onboarding new folks that are says in Australia. So yeah, completely different time zones. Basically, how do you get this team number one onboarded? This is kind of what they're talking about, right? Like, but I figured I'd talk about this more generally. This is what I've been doing for like 5 years now at Microsoft. Not with ramping up new teams, I mean, but just like cross geo collaboration. So I'm not going to talk about this from the perspective of like, hey, I'm an expert, I figured this out. This is still very much a work in progress for me. Let me get started driving at least before I rant for way too long and haven't even moved. But yeah, it's a really good conversation, I think, or topic of conversation, because I think that especially with so much of the world going to like remote work, but this is just more and more common. And personally, I don't know, like I feel like maybe other people feel differently about this, but I feel like we haven't necessarily caught up on how to do this kind of thing effectively. I think there's probably been companies that have been around for like like pre-2020 kind of time period that have been doing remote first and doing it well, and that's all good. And if every time I stop this car it's going to beep at me, I'm probably going to have a breakdown, to be honest. It's actually like warm out. There's no reason that this thing should be doing that. And so yeah, I think there's probably companies that have been doing this for ages and they do it well. So my focus here isn't to say, oh, like no one knows how to do this, it can't be done well. But I think there's probably a lot of companies that we just haven't really figured out like a super effective way to do cross geo, cross time zone kind of collaboration. So a friendly reminder that as I get into this, if you are thinking that you want to have your questions answered, leave them in the comments, and or send a message to DevLeader on social media. That's also my main YouTube channel. If you send in a message, I'll keep you anonymous. That way you can write whatever you want, and I'll do my very best to try and give you some advice. So to kind of back up a little bit for at least my experience, like prior to Microsoft, I spent 8 years at a startup that was very much just, centered in one time zone. We didn't have to think about anything complicated like that. We were really just like one office co-located. There was no remote work was really rare. We had a couple of exceptional cases where we had a couple of remote employees. But overall, just like everyone's centered in one spot. And then we ended up having a satellite office, but still in the same time zone. Come on, man. Stop beeping. God. It's like this is going to give me a mental breakdown before being burnt out from work. So I had like a large part of my career that I just like didn't really have to think about different time zones and stuff like that. So when I started at Microsoft, this is my first sort of experience where it's like that's a really big part of what I have to sort through. Now, I can't speak on behalf of like every single team at Microsoft or anything like that. It's far too big with far too much variety for me to even claim this is like the majority. But at least for what I've seen in the area that I work in, it's called Substrate or Office 365. Substrate sort of the infrastructure that all of the services run on for Office 365. In Substrate, it's a pretty common pattern that we would have like a North American based team, right? And then there would be a counterpart to that team in China. And it's really helpful, I mean, for many reasons, but one of the most simple, straightforward reasons is like, if you consider that we have live services that are running 24/7 but need to have extreme availability, like, that means that when we in North America are going to sleep, it's not like the services just turn off, right? Like they have to be operational. So we basically need people that can be experts at any point in time, and especially because we don't want to have to like wake up in the middle of the night from a support perspective if we don't have to. It just kind of makes sense, and at this scale, I think it makes a ton of sense. So that's like one of the most simple reasons for us to follow that kind of model. Now there's tons of other reasons to consider something like this, from talent, just having a global talent pool to, I don't know, regardless, you can come up with any reason you want. But this is like one of the major benefits for us as a highly available set of live services. But the whole focus of this conversation is like challenges, right? So like, how do we navigate this kind of thing? Because the reality is that while there's a lot of benefit to having teams that can be cross geography, cross time zone, there's a lot of challenges that come with that. And the first part is just like, if you consider teams that are working together, and by the way, as I talk through this, I'm not assuming any sort of like prior experience working in software companies. Like, so some things I might be saying here, you're like, well, no shit, Nick. But for some people, you might not have started in the software industry yet. So this is kind of meant to be applicable to anyone. If you're co-located working on stuff, and let's say even in office, like it's very easy to just turn and talk to people, right? And if you're now talking about remote employees, but you're at least in the same time zone, you can like get on chat or you can ping them and say, hey, let me call you. And like you have this convenient ability to communicate, right? But once you start having even different, say in North America from East to West Coast, there's a 3-hour difference, right? So what do you like already, if you think about like traditional like 9 to 5 like sort of working time frame, now you have to consider like, okay, well, someone on the East Coast, if they start at 9, that's 6 a.m. for people in Pacific. So like, what do you do, right? Sorry, one sec. Had to respond to my skip level manager, and I'm sitting here at a light, so it seemed like a safe thing to do. It says something about a phone call, and usually that would mean something quite important. So if you already have like a 3-hour time difference and you're thinking about like working hour overlap, like that's already gonna put some inconveniences on people, right? So the whole point here is that the more varied the time zones, the more and more challenges that you can start to face. Like things that seem otherwise very simple now can get more complicated for collaboration, right? So the one simple example that comes to mind to me is like, scheduling meetings. And then you're like, why is this person scheduling a meeting during my lunch hour? And it's because it's not their lunch hour. Right? Someone's scheduling a 3 o'clock meeting in Eastern time zone, and they're like, hey, this is a great time slot. And you're like, yeah, except I'm in Pacific and I'm trying to eat my lunch after, a jam-packed morning full of meetings or other activities. And you're like, I don't want to do a meeting over lunch. So something as simple as that becomes kind of weird. Or at least something you have to give more consideration to. The thing, once we start getting into like cross geography, like especially different countries and stuff getting involved, different literally employees that might have management chains that report up differently, right? So like, quick example, like our engineers in China, like they don't report to me from like a management perspective, right? Like from a people leadership perspective, they have their own manager. And I think that's a really good model so that they have like career support and stuff. But from like a project and sort of work stream perspective, like I collaborate with the manager in China and we get alignment. Some stuff we might argue is like driven more, like air quotes here, like out of headquarters, but a lot of like it's very collaborative in my mind. So that's all goodness in terms of like that reporting structure. But once you start to have this cross geography thing going on, I think it really levels up the challenges with collaboration. So something I think that's worked really well for us, and again, this is like things I've seen over the past 5 years, because even my previous team and current team, very similar in terms of setup, even though they're completely different teams. The idea being that we pick some days of the week that we are saying, these are days, and it's not every day, but these are days that we are willing to sort of have open scheduling in cross time zone like hours, right? So brief example is like at the end of the day on a Tuesday, we might say like, hey, the people in North America in Pacific time are willing to have meetings like between 5 and 6 and PM, right? And then that means that people in China would, to get the overlap, they would have to be willing to have like an 8 a.m. meeting, depending on daylight savings time and stuff like that. It gets a little bit crappier at certain times of the year. But like, that's one example, right? And then it means, yes, the people on the East Coast, and for us, in terms of how we're spread out, not many on the East Coast, so it's not such a challenge on our team. But it might mean the odd person is like, okay, on a Tuesday, I might have like a late meeting, like an 8 p.m. meeting, which, don't get me wrong, that sucks. But we kind of try to find this balance, and that might mean for the person with the 8 p.m. meeting in Eastern time, that they're like, hey, on a Tuesday, like I'm just going to start work later, or I'm going to take a longer lunch, or I'm going to compensate on some other day for it. Like, and I would encourage that, like they should, because they shouldn't say, okay, well, I'm going to start, my 9 a.m. Eastern and then take a meeting at 8 p.m. and just work the whole time. And for anyone that is doing that, like I would strongly encourage against that, because it's not going to be sustainable. But the point is that we, as a team, come up with like some days of the week that we're like, okay, these ones we're willing to try and have like some cross-team collaboration. And so we'll vote on it, that kind of thing, try to get some alignment. And that way we hold ourselves accountable when someone's like, man, like we should schedule something to have a conversation. It's like, hey, look, like, you're kind of doing an exceptional thing if you're going outside of that time boundary. So it's not that you're not allowed to or anything like that, but you should have the expectation that like you should be scheduling in those dedicated slots. And if you need to go outside of that, you're having dedicated conversations to say, hey, look, like are you able to meet? Otherwise, like, let's find other ways to collaborate, like asynchronously, right? And then we can follow up in a better time. So anyway, the one point was around like dedicated slots the team agrees on. And like, I'll give you another example too, because a new thing on my current team setup is that I actually have some engineers in Europe, and I have not had engineers in Europe before that I'm collaborating with on a regular basis. So that's why for me, like when I talk about being burnt out over the past like couple of months now, like one of the things contributing to that, and I'm not blaming the engineers in Europe, but like I have a daily meeting with them, and it was like at 9 o'clock, but that's also the time on some days I'm trying to drive to the office. That's also like now been moved to 8:30, which means that I have to be prepared before 8:30. So every day of the week now starts for me before 8 o'clock. Before 8:30. So generally sometime around 8 o'clock. But I also have meetings after hours from, North America to meet with China and collaborate that way that sometimes go till 6. I have some days of the week where I have an 8 p.m. meeting. So like for me, I have a whole bunch of stuff that's layered on top, and it's like, it's absolutely not sustainable, right? So I'm just giving you an example of like, we found some time slots where we can at least overlap, and that's really good, but also like, it's not a sustainable thing for me to do like an 8:30 a.m. daily sync with engineers in Europe. It just isn't. Not unless I'm giving up something else. But this is time boxed, so it's like I understand it's going to have a negative impact on me in the short term, but I kind of accept my fate, and like I said, I know it's time boxed. Something that's really important to consider is that, so you have dedicated time slots, asynchronous communication, and leaning into this as much as possible. Some things are really helpful to talk about on a call, but to give you an example, if you were going to review, someone's design together, right? So you have a design review for a design document that was put together. What I would say is like a really inefficient use of time is to pull people together for an hour and basically just read through the design together. In some meetings I've seen before, it's like, we'll use the first, 10 to 20 minutes to do like shared reading time. I think absolute worst use of time I could imagine. And it's not because, the counter argument is, well, we want to make sure everyone had time to read. And it's like, yeah, but you don't need to get X number of people across time zones at the same time to read a document together. Like, to me, it's completely senseless to do that. So that's a really bad example. And then you layer on, like, say that someone who's presenting the design is basically just reading through the document. It's like, what value is that, right? Because now you're trying to synchronously provide people information that they could have consumed ahead of time. So in a situation like this, I would say, like, how much work could everyone do on their own asynchronously ahead of time? And try to enable that kind of thing, right? Get the design sent out well in advance, more than 24 hours. Get it sent out. Make sure that people are taking it seriously to go review and add comments, get a discussion going. Try to have conversations about things from the design ahead of time, either through comments, asking questions, whatever, so that when you come together to discuss things, like, you already have some burning topics that really need to be addressed, so that you can use that time together to have valuable conversations, not, okay, let's read through this. Okay, let me read it back to you. Okay, does anyone have questions now for the first time? And, oh yeah, sorry, don't have the answer for that. We'll have to follow up. Now you've spent an hour together and have accomplished basically nothing, right? So leaning into asynchronous work as much as you possibly can, because otherwise things get delayed tremendously. If I can reflect on one of the biggest bottlenecks or slowdowns that I've seen coming from a startup that was like rapidly growing to Microsoft, which is like ridiculously big as a company, is the sort of the overhead of communication because of the scale, because of cross geography, because of all these things layered together. There is so much overhead and time between communication. So I cannot stress enough. I'm not saying that everything is perfect for asynchronous conversations, but trying to do it as much as you can to keep things unblocked, I think, is like number one. To sort of emphasize that point, if there was one time slot in the week that you agreed upon as a team that is like the cross geography time to meet, and it's the day after that, and you're like, well, we really need to meet to talk about something, are you going to wait one whole week before you can start having a conversation? Like, absolutely not. It would be so insane to do that. So you should start as early as possible asynchronous communication. I would say another thing to layer on, it's kind of related to asynchronous communication, but it's like, if you know that you have these different working hours, right? As much as possible, trying to do like a handoff, I think, is valuable. So, you know, the example I was giving with the daily meeting that I have currently with my engineering counterparts in Europe, based on the work they're doing, what we will do in our time, like our daytime, is, you know, we'll see how far they got on their work, and we'll go, great, like, let us know what you want us to follow up with in our daytime. We'll go make progress on that, so by the time you come back online, like, we can unblock you. So I think this is a really powerful strategy. It's not, again, it's not like it's a silver bullet, solves every problem, but I see a lot of value in it. I've seen it working really well for what we've been doing recently, right? So you'll have a team, they get stuck on something, and it's like, no problem, like, we'll try to find the experts in our time zone, chat with them, get you the information you need, and continue on. So it's really about like finding what you can do in your time zone, and when you need to, you're getting other people. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because I have to switch lanes here. You're doing as much as you can in your time zone, and then figuring out what you need to rely on the other time zone for, and being clear about those asks. Go over one more lane. Now, specifically around onboarding, I think this can be challenging because this is a period of time where you probably need to do some of the most like hand-holding, collaboration, making people feel connected. I realize, like, you know, if there's budget, like, one of the best things you can do, I realized this example from Reddit was like people in Australia. It's probably going to be pretty cost prohibitive, but if there's any opportunity for travel budget, getting people together once, I think, is super helpful. Come on, you got to move. God. Okay. Yeah, I've noticed that in improving collaboration, if there is travel budget, you get people together at least once, can make like a ridiculous difference. This gets more into some nuances around like how people communicate in terms of like written communication or even calls and stuff. I've talked about this in other videos, but like sometimes you can have friction build up, and like it's just because personalities aren't really aligning. You could have language barriers, cultural differences, and then you bring people together. And I've seen and I'm not saying, again, it's not silver bullet solves everything, but I've seen like multiple times where you can it's completely evaporated some difficulties like this. So something that I would recommend if there's travel budget, but I also recognize like can be very cost prohibitive. But yeah, when you're getting people onboarded, this is a period where you're gonna have probably a lot more need for relying on collaboration and communication cross time zone. Might not be a great answer, but something that comes to mind is like, do you come up with an onboarding strategy where it means in the shorter term, the sort of, I don't know how you would call it, but like the headquarters or whatever, like, yeah, like maybe your work hours you might have to compensate a little bit, right? I'm kind of thinking about the situation I'm in right now where I'm like, hey, it's time boxed. So for a period of time, it's kind of crappy, but like we acknowledge the value it's adding, and we acknowledge that it's not indefinitely. So for example, could you have a couple of people and maybe you rotate through, but you have a couple of volunteers that might wake up early or stay up late depending on the overlap, and you're like, you're gonna have this responsibility where you're helping out to get folks onboarded more effectively. And then for those individuals doing that, it's like giving them some time back at other points, right? So like, hey, by the way, like, I'm just making up an example to illustrate, but like on a Monday and Wednesday, you're going to be up and you're going to be online for 7:30 a.m. so that you can help with this other team. But on basically like take a half day on Friday, right? Or take every other Friday off or something like that. Just so it's like, it's not, hey, you just have to work more, but it's like, we're recognizing that you're facilitating something that's really valuable. And like, we want to acknowledge that, and just coming up with some plan that's, that's going to be overall helpful for the team, but without, totally burning people out. Because, the reality is that kind of thing, I think, when it's sustained, will absolutely take a toll on people. So finding a balance there, just trying to think of something that might be a little bit creative to try and help. But I do think, as I'm getting close to the office, having alignment on when you can do cross geo stuff. Something else that came to mind, and this slipped my mind, sorry. I talked about my current setup right now. We have people in North America, people in China, people in Europe. There's just 3 separate time zones, and there is no overlap between the 3. There is no overlap between those 3. That's reasonable. So how we've been doing this is we'll find ways to like, our China team can sync with our team in Europe. Our team in Europe can sync with North America, and the North America can sync with the people in China. And you have to over-communicate when you do this kind of thing. That's maybe something else to stress, because there's more opportunity to like forget a detail, right? Oh yeah, like we communicated this, and it's like, yeah, but you communicated it only with that other team, right? It's like more opportunity for like broken telephone kind of side effect. So like making sure you're over communicating goes a long way. I'm just realizing like how fragmented my thought process was while recording this, but probably a side effect of just a long week. So apologies for that, but I hope there's some tidbits in there that are useful, at least to get your thought process going. I want to acknowledge that like cross geo stuff, different time zones can be really challenging. I'm literally literally feeling the effect of that right now. So it's a lot. But one of the things that's super valuable is, like I was saying, we have this opportunity where we can collaborate with engineers that are awesome in different parts of the world. And I think when you can nail down like effective ways to collaborate and communicate, then you can really take advantage of that. Now, let's see if there's any parking in here. Probably not. Someone in front of me is already going to be getting spots. They're not taking that one. Okay. Good. So parked on the line. This is so stupid. I hope that person doesn't go into their vehicle because it's going to hit my car. But anyway, I'm done. I'm at work. Bye.